Good morning. Today I'm going to continue talking about rewards and punishments, of course, as connected with addiction. The addictions we have to rewards and punishments, and the results, which are systemic and very big. 30 to 40% of World Bank loans, that is rewards, on or around March 1992, all of this today is from back in 1992, were for agriculture. The World Bank controls how they are to be used, and naturally some are for the transfer of technology. So technology is rewarded, and we have a big addiction to technology. We have too much technology because of our addiction. Technology is very often rewarded. Another author, an author by the name of Robert Goodman, noted there could be an environmental nightmare if cheap, non-polluting, so-called, energy with small, beautiful technology were somehow introduced into the United States. And it has been introduced. We have it right now. The savings from less expensive energy could allow increased consumerism. That is another addiction. We think that having more things is a reward. It's not a reward. It just causes a lot of problems for ourselves in the long run, for our earth. More raw materials would have to be exploited to meet this new demand. That's on one side. In the process, more waste would be created, causing more pollution. So more natural resources are used and more waste is produced. Two different problems. Because we run out of those, some of those resources go extinct, perhaps because of all the overuse. Some leaders of the city of Mexico now we're in Mexico. Okay. So some leaders had an idea on how to clean up pollution based on, of course, technology, our addiction. Because of the rewards involved, somehow they see rewards in technology. The idea was the development of a type of huge fan which would pull the polluted air out, much like wind. At the end of the article, there's a comment by one of the leaders, Mr. Castillo, that if this did not work, they were going to look very bad. Well, it isn't just that they're going to look very bad. It's not what the reward or punishment is to them. It's the fact that it's so irresponsible. How they look is not the issue. Rather, it's the cost of development and the extensive indirect cost in health, cleanliness, natural resources of allowing the real causes of pollution to continue. That is our overconsumption and other addictions that we have. The development of technology is a diversion from the real problems. Okay, the decision, now here's something different. These are all separate points, so I hope you don't have too much trouble jumping around from point to point. The decision to globalize research and development of technology and industry was made by some high-up decision maker, perhaps from the United Nations or perhaps from the United States. That could be part of the plan for increased regional integration, especially since the International Development Bank has refined instruments for the purpose of rewarding, they call it encouraging, the forwarding of research and development in Latin America. So, the research and development of technology and industry. That, again, That's part of the plan, and perhaps these refined instruments are going to give the reward to those who do the research and development. Forwarding the addiction. One sophisticated form of violence. Now we're on the other side. There's rewards and then there's violence. Okay, this is violence. One sophisticated form was developed in the last century. It can be used to bring third world nations to their knees and willing to accept the terms laid out for them by excessive business interests. These excessive interests are part of the addiction to growth, economic growth, which is connected, of course, to money, making money, and that is an addiction which is not connected to the earth, and it very often hurts the earth. The reality is not connected to reality. It's separate from reality. This form of violence is known as low-intensity conflict. It was used in Vietnam and Guatemala, for example, in the burning of villages where guerrillas were thought to be harbored. And this very often is done for the forward and advancement of too much business, too much economic growth. Some concrete examples of this phenomenon taken from headlines, this violent phenomenon, when you use violence. There's some headlines in regard to agrarian Mexico. Figueroa Alcocer behind repression in Atoyac. And then they mentioned the party, PRD, that's a party, political party in Mexico. So repression would be the punishment which was used here by Figueroa Alcocer. And then another punishment is when people are murdered. Here is one. The Agrarian Congress protests the murder of Hector Montes. Hector. That was another headline. Those two were headlines. Okay, an example of high growth in business is found with the plastics industry in Mexico. I went to Mexico before they had this industry, the growth in the industry. And Mexico used to be a very neat, clean place compared to what I was used to in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They didn't have plastic. They didn't have a lot of extra paper, and that's what I thought of, paper and plastic. They didn't have plastic in those days, basically. But between 1984 and 1991, it grew at a rate of 32% per year. So from 84 to 91, that's about 7 years, and it just grew by leaps and bounds, and at the end of that, I could see the difference. Mexico was just a mess with all that plastic flying around in Mexico City and in the countryside. It really ruined the beauty that I had noticed before, the neatness from before. Increased garbage in many places in Mexico City. And plastic is biodegradable. Okay. Another example of irrational growth. Kevin Starr in California, again, we're back in 92, has had the following lesson. The San Francisco earthquake and the big fire of October 1991 have shown that California ought to have more respect for the limits of growth. According to Starr, over-engineering of the environment has caused problems. Now, according to him, California is a dangerous place. So he knew that that'd be 30 years ago. He knew that 30 years ago, and now we see Now we see the forest fires as never before. But way back in 92, he was talking about it, about how the growth of these developments, housing developments, where they plant these pine trees, which catch on fire very easily. Once you start those dry trees, they just go. They go like paper. They just go really fast. And that's why they were making it a dangerous place way back then by their overdoing of growth. They were growing by leaps and bounds. They were changing farmland or whatever, natural land, into housing, into living places. And they didn't leave well enough alone, and now they're suffering. We are all suffering the consequence of losing a lot of California from that overgrowth. Also, global warming, which is also connected with our deterioration of the planet. Pathological growth problems were present way back in the Mayan period, according to this writer, Clive Ponting. The downfall of the Mayan culture had to do with the overexploitation of natural resources. In the end, they were not sufficient for the very developed superstructure. Recent discoveries point also at the other side, which is punishment, violence, as a big cause of their problems. They were killing people quite a bit back then. But maybe today we can become aware of this type of problem and thereby gain insight into the solution. Way back then, 92, Jose Sarucan, ex-rector of Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, noted the growing involvement of ecologists with problems related to the growth and development of the country. He noted them, the involvement of ecologists with problems related to the growth and development of the country, which obviously impinge seriously on many ecological matters. But sadly, there has been a stubbornness at looking at these things because of our addictions. If it weren't an addiction, it wouldn't be such a big problem, but the addiction keeps pushing itself forward and keeps continuing. Addictions are not easily overcome, but when we realize our addiction is to the rewards, we can say to ourselves, the growth of the economy is not love. The reward represents to us love. That is not love. That is ruining our earth, which is far from love. It is not true love. It is, and if we can tell ourselves that, maybe we can stop growing. We can stop cooperating with other people who want us to do our part for the growth of the economy. Growth as an ideal back in 92 continued, and it continues today. Growth in agricultural production was an objective of one of the last national development at that time plans in Mexico. According to Jaime Serra Puche, who was the Secretary of Commerce in Mexico, one of the basic objectives of Carlos Salinas de Gortari, who was the president at the time, and his brother, as an aside, I'll tell you, his brother was involved in, they were accusing him when I was there of being involved in the drug problem. Anyway, he said that one of the basic objectives is stable and sustainable growth, quote unquote, Carlos Salinas de Gortari back then. And I don't think it's changed today. Everybody still talks about growth as if it were something positive. But